In old Hollywood, hair wasn't just hair, it was power. A lush head of curls could land you a movie deal, a fan club, and a fantasy. But beneath all that charm and camera-perfect confidence, some of the biggest stars were fighting a quieter battle with their own receding hairlines. They glued, pinned, and powdered their way through the spotlight, determined to keep the illusion alive. Because in a world that worshipped beauty, baldness was a scandal waiting to happen. These actors didn't just wear wigs, they wore survival, vanity, and pride, stitched strand by strand beneath the studio lights. Here are 16 vintage Hollywood stars who were bald but wore wigs. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart didn't need a full head of hair to own a room, but Hollywood didn't see it that way. By his mid-30s, the future king of film noir was already losing his hair. A cruel twist for a man whose image depended on effortless masculinity. In an era when baldness was treated almost like a scandal, Bogart's studio insisted he wear wigs and toupees to maintain that sleek, commanding look. Under the hot lights of Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon, his carefully styled hairpiece became as much a part of his costume as his trench coat and cigarette. But Bogart never pretended to care much. Behind the scenes, he often joked about it, once calling his wig a rug that makes him 10 years younger and twice as cocky. He didn't chase vanity, he chased truth. What made Bogart magnetic wasn't his hair, but that rough-edged honesty that poured through his every line. Even as his hair thinned and his face aged, his charisma only grew sharper, more defiant. By the 1950s, he sometimes ditched the wig entirely when off-camera, daring Hollywood's beauty rules to keep up. That quiet rebellion, a man choosing character over perfection, made him timeless. John Wayne. John Wayne was the ultimate American hero, tall, commanding, and unshakably masculine. On screen, he could stare down an army, a storm, or a villain without flinching. But behind that legendary confidence was a secret that followed him from his early 30s. The Duke was balding. By the time he rose to fame in the 1940s, Wayne had already started wearing a hairpiece, a discreet toupee that became part of his public armor. Hollywood depended on his image. A cowboy with a receding hairline didn't fit the myth, so Wayne's hair was treated like a national symbol. His studio hairstylist once joked that his wig deserved its own billing. Meticulously crafted and securely glued before every shoot, it endured dust, heat, and horseback chases without betraying him. Few fans ever suspected the truth, and Wayne liked it that way. But off-camera, he wasn't ashamed. Friends recalled that he could peel it off at home with a grin, toss it aside, and pour himself a drink. He didn't hide it out of vanity, he hid it out of professionalism. He once said audiences don't pay to see John Wayne, they pay to see the Duke. The hair was simply part of the uniform, like a cowboy hat or a badge of honor. By his later years, Wayne had become so iconic that even without the toupee, his power remained untouched. His voice, his walk, his presence, were the real trademarks. Sean Connery. When audiences first met Sean Connery as James Bond in Dr. No, 1962, he was everything men wanted to be. Suave, fearless, impossibly confident. Women swooned, men took notes, and Hollywood had its perfect gentleman spy. But what most fans never knew was that Connery was almost completely bald before he ever ordered his first martini on screen. He began losing his hair in his early 20s, long before fame found him. By the time he auditioned for Bond, the thinning was so visible that producers insisted he wear a toupee for the role. And so he did, in every Bond film he ever made. The dark, perfectly shaped hair wasn't his own. It was a masterfully designed piece of illusion that became part of the 007 mystique. Connery, however, never seemed embarrassed about it. Off-set, he often went without it, bald and proud. Friends said he wore his wig like a costume, something that belonged to Bond, not to him. After leaving the spy franchise, Connery embraced his natural look completely. In The Untouchables, Indiana Jones, and The Last Crusade, and other later classics, he appeared bald, and audiences loved him even more for it. It was a quiet victory. The man who once had to wear hair to look powerful eventually proved he didn't need it. Connery's confidence, that deep Scottish voice, and the authority in his eyes made him irresistible, wig or not. He redefined charm by making age and baldness look noble, even appealing. William Shatner. William Shatner's hair has been one of Hollywood's longest-running mysteries, almost as famous as Star Trek itself. When he first beamed onto screens as Captain James T. Kirk in the 1960s, he was all charm and confidence, the kind of man who could out-talk aliens and outshine the stars. But long before the Enterprise took flight, Shatner had already begun losing his hair. By his late 20s, the hairline was retreating fast, and television cameras didn't forgive. Rather than admit defeat, Shatner chose innovation and secrecy. For years, he wore finely crafted toupees, designed by Hollywood's best stylists. They weren't the stiff, obvious wigs many actors used. They were sleek, subtle, and practically part of his identity. On Star Trek, his hairpieces were engineered to withstand hot lights, fight scenes, and the occasional transporter malfunction. The debate over Shatner's hair became legendary among fans. Was it real, or was it transplanted? The actor never gave a straight answer, and that became part of the charm. In interviews, he dodged the topic with humor. Over the decades, his approach evolved. By the 1980s, during the Star Trek film revival, he reportedly used custom-made wigs so skillful they looked indistinguishable from natural hair. Later in life, he leaned into the mystery completely, neither confirming nor denying anything. That playful defiance became his trademark. Shatner didn't let baldness define him. He turned it into a running joke that kept him larger than life. Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds was the very definition of 1970s masculinity. The smirk, the laugh, the mustache that launched 1,000 crushes. He made being a man look easy. Fast cars, faster wit, and movie posters that practically radiated confidence. But even as he burned up the screen in Smokey and The Bandit and Deliverance, Reynolds was fighting a private battle with his hairline. His thick, dark hair was part of his signature look, yet by his late 30s, it was quietly thinning. Rather than surrender, Burt turned to Hollywood's best wig makers. His hairpieces weren't simple covers, they were masterpieces, designed to look as rugged and effortless as he did. On set, stylists treated them like sacred artifacts, washed, trimmed, and glued with precision before every take. For years, he kept the secret close. He joked about everything else, his fame, his romances, his box office ups and downs, but not the hair. It was his last layer of armor in an industry obsessed with youth. When a magazine once hinted he wore a toupee, he brushed it off with a grin and said, "I paid good money for this hair. Of course, it's mine." As time went on, though, Reynolds loosened up. By the 2000s, he spoke more openly about it, even laughing at how seriously Hollywood once took such things. Everyone wore something fake. Some just hid it better, was his opinion. In truth, his wig wasn't about vanity. It was about continuity. Burt Reynolds didn't want to look younger. He wanted to look like himself, the man audiences had fallen for. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's voice was pure velvet, smooth, calm, and endlessly comforting. He could sing a nation through a war and make Christmas feel like a prayer. But while his voice was his crown, his hair told a different story. By his late 20s, Crosby's famous crooner charm was already shadowed by a rapidly receding hairline. In the image-obsessed 1930s, that was no small problem. Early studio photos show him experimenting with slicked-back styles to hide the thinning. But soon, it wasn't enough. Like many stars of his era, Crosby turned to custom-made hairpieces. They were subtle and well-crafted, designed to keep him camera-ready through endless recording sessions, golf games, and close-up shots. His stylists joked that his toupee had more stage presence than most actors. Unlike others, though, Crosby treated his baldness with gentle humor. He never obsessed over it or pretended to be flawless. Off camera, friends often saw him bareheaded and relaxed, singing or golfing without a hint of vanity. He knew his real appeal came not from hair but from authenticity, that easy, everyman warmth that made audiences feel safe. As he aged, Crosby's toupee became part of his professional uniform, like a tuxedo or a microphone, and he wore it well. Even as styles changed, his classic image endured. The hat tilted just right, the grin half hidden, the voice melting through radios across America. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire moved like music itself, light, precise, impossibly smooth. Watching him dance was like watching silk float on air. But behind the perfection, Astaire was quietly self-conscious about one thing: his hair. By his early 30s, as he leapt and twirled through Hollywood's golden musicals, his hairline was already receding. In a world built on fantasy, baldness wasn't just aging, it was almost career suicide. So, Astaire turned to a solution as elegant as his footwork. He wore finely tailored hairpieces, crafted to withstand his athletic routines and those famous sweat-drenched tap numbers. Each wig was secured with surgical precision, styled to stay flawless, even after hours of dancing under studio lights. Co-stars said he treated his hairpieces like instruments, tuned, maintained, and never to be discussed. But what truly set him apart was his attitude. Astaire didn't wear a wig to pretend he was young. He wore it because performance was about illusion. Just as costumes, lighting, and choreography transformed a stage, the hairpiece was another layer of artistry. And he was honest about that. By the time he appeared in Funny Face and The Bandwagon, audiences didn't see thinning hair, they saw timeless grace. When he finally began appearing bareheaded in later interviews, no one cared. The magic was still there. James Stewart. James Stewart wasn't just a movie star, he was decency personified. With his soft-spoken drawl and honest eyes, he could make audiences believe in goodness, even in a cynical world. But behind that all-American image, Stewart faced the same creeping insecurity that haunted many leading men of his generation: hair loss. By his early 40s, the It's a Wonderful Life actor had begun thinning noticeably, and the studios took note. Hollywood still demanded the illusion of youth, even from its most genuine souls. So Stewart quietly began wearing a hairpiece, not for vanity, but for continuity. His wig was subtle, custom-made to match the modesty of the man himself. Unlike the glamorous toupees of other stars, he was practical, unshowy, and nearly invisible under the camera's gaze. Stewart wore it in most of his major post-war films, from Harvey to Vertigo and Anatomy of a Murder. But what set him apart was his humility about it. Friends said he never fussed, never hid behind the facade. He saw it as part of his costume, no different from a suit or a tie, just another way to serve the story. Off-screen, Stewart was comfortable with his baldness. He appeared at home or among friends without his hairpiece, content in his simplicity. Even as age silvered his hair and time thinned it completely, audiences never stopped believing in him. Robert Taylor. In the 1930s, MGM sold Robert Taylor as perfection in human form. With his sculpted jaw, dark hair, and striking eyes, he was marketed as the man with the perfect profile. He was every studio publicist's dream, an image of beauty so flawless, it barely seemed real. But behind that image was a private truth Taylor guarded fiercely. He began losing his hair in his late 20s. For a man whose looks were his livelihood, it was devastating. MGM executives, terrified of tarnishing their leading man, immediately arranged for a series of expertly designed toupees. Each one was handcrafted by the studio's top wig makers to blend seamlessly under the glare of Technicolor. On screen, no one could tell, not in Camille, Waterloo Bridge, or Quo Vadis. His hair always appeared immaculate, giving the illusion of eternal youth. Taylor, however, never felt completely at ease with it. Co-stars remembered his quiet, almost shy nature off-camera, a stark contrast to his regal presence in costume. He once joked that his wig got more attention than his acting, but there was truth beneath the humor. Beneath the charm and polish, he feared being exposed in a town that equated beauty with worth. Yet, over time, he found peace with it. His confidence grew from experience, not appearance. When his roles matured into tougher, more introspective characters in the 1950s, his hairpiece became secondary to his craft. By then, audiences weren't looking at his hair. They were watching his eyes, the sadness, and the depth that only time could bring. Bob Hope. Bob Hope had a gift for making the world forget its troubles. With one grin, one perfectly timed joke, he could turn anxiety into laughter. But while he was busy entertaining millions, he quietly shared one of Hollywood's most common insecurities: baldness. By his early 30s, Hope's hair had thinned dramatically. For a comedian constantly in the public eye, it could have been a punchline he didn't want. Instead, he made it his own. Hope began wearing a toupee early in his film career, carefully tailored to match his quick, boyish energy. Unlike dramatic actors who guarded their hair secrets, Hope used humor as camouflage. He joked about it often, once saying, he didn't need a hairpiece, he just rent shade from Bing Crosby. The line was pure Bob, self-deprecating, clever, and disarming. His wigs were high quality, lightweight pieces designed to withstand his relentless performance schedule. From movie sets to USO tours during World War II, they stayed perfectly in place under bright lights and blazing heat. His stylists made sure the rug, as he called it, was always camera-ready, but never too perfect. Bob knew his charm came from being relatable, not untouchable. As he aged, he leaned further into the joke. On talk shows, he'd tease interviewers before they could tease him. By the time he was an elder statesman of comedy, Hope's hair, real or not, no longer mattered. His laughter had outlived the illusion. In the end, his legacy wasn't built on image, but on generosity, wit, and a spirit that never aged, even if his hair did. Yul Brynner. In a town obsessed with perfect hair, Yul Brynner became a legend by having none. When he stepped onto the set of The King and I in 1951, his shaved head wasn't a style statement, it was an experiment. He'd shaved it for the stage role, believing it would make him look more commanding as King Mongkut of Siam. The result was electric. His bare scalp caught the light like armor, turning his character into something otherworldly, regal, dangerous, unforgettable. The audience loved it. When he reprised the role for the film in 1956, Brynner's bald head became iconic, a symbol of confidence and authority. While most male stars were hiding their receding hairlines under wigs, Brynner's clean-shaven crown became his signature. It broke every Hollywood rule. He proved that charisma didn't come from appearance, but from presence. Ironically, Brynner had once worn wigs early in his career, when he still worked in television and small film roles. But once he embraced baldness, he never looked back. He even grew protective of the image, refusing to wear wigs for new parts and rejecting producers who suggested he look more traditional. For Brynner, baldness wasn't a flaw. It was a declaration of independence. His look influenced generations. Long before bald and bold became fashionable, Yul Brynner made it magnetic. He wore his head like a crown, and it changed how masculinity was seen on screen. Even near the end of his life, when illness weakened his body, that proud, gleaming head still radiated power. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was the definition of cool. The voice, the suits, the swagger. He didn't just sing songs, he seduced them. But behind the blue eyes and effortless style, Old Blue Eyes had a secret that followed him through much of his career: hair loss. By his early 30s, Sinatra's famous slicked-back hair was thinning fast, and the cameras didn't miss a thing. For a man who built an empire on confidence, losing his hair felt like losing part of his image. So, like many stars of his era, he turned to expert wig makers. His hairpieces were top of the line, hand-woven, feather-light. and designed to survive the heat of stage lights and the frenzy of Vegas performances. Stylists said Sinatra had multiple wigs for different occasions, a darker one for concerts, a softer brown for films, and a silver blend as he aged. But Sinatra wasn't fragile about it. He was strategic. He understood that illusion was part of show business. In public, his hair was perfect, every strand disciplined into place. In private, friends often saw him without it, unbothered and laughing. He reportedly referred to his wig as his helmet, joking that it helped him handle showgirls and stage lights alike. By the 1970s, he embraced a more natural look, sometimes appearing with noticeably thinner hair and letting age soften his vanity. It didn't change a thing. The voice still filled rooms, the presence still commanded attention. Fans didn't love Sinatra for his hair. They loved the emotion in his songs, the way he made heartbreak sound romantic and pride sound poetic. Frank Sinatra taught Hollywood a quiet truth that charisma doesn't come from perfection. It comes from control, rhythm, and confidence. Yvonne de Carlo. Yvonne de Carlo was the kind of beauty Hollywood dreamed about, exotic, dark-eyed, and mysterious. From Salome, where she danced, to the Ten Commandments, she embodied the fantasy of timeless seduction. But behind the cascade of raven hair that framed her face on screen was a truth few ever guessed. Much of it wasn't real. Like many actresses of her era, de Carlo relied on wigs, hairpieces, and extensions, not out of vanity, but survival. Years of constant styling, harsh dyes, and studio demands had taken a toll on her natural hair by her early 30s. To maintain her image, she began wearing specially crafted wigs that restored her trademark volume and shine. These weren't the heavy costume wigs of biblical epics. They were light, handmade creations designed to look utterly natural under Technicolor lights. De Carlo treated them like part of her costume, never ashamed, never secretive. On the set of The Munsters, where she famously played Lily Munster, she leaned into the theatricality of it all. The jet-black streaked wig she wore became iconic, symbolizing both camp and elegance. Off-camera, Yvonne was refreshingly down-to-earth about it. Friends recalled her pulling off her wig between takes, laughing and fanning herself from the heat. To her, beauty was an illusion she had mastered, but never mistaken for truth. As years passed and the spotlight faded, de Carlo continued to appear on stage and television with dignity and humor, never defined by her hair, but by her presence. Beneath the glamour and the gloss stood a woman who understood that Hollywood perfection was always a performance, and she performed it better than anyone. Norma Shearer. Norma Shearer was Hollywood royalty long before the word starlet was coined. With her flawless poise, commanding eyes, and refined sensuality, she became MGM's reigning queen of the 1930s, the woman who could play both saint and sinner with equal grace. But as she glittered under the studio lights, few knew that her trademark curls, those soft, sculpted waves, were often not her own. Years of bleaching, waving, and relentless heat treatments had weakened Shearer's natural hair. By her mid-30s, the once luxuriant locks began thinning, a quiet heartbreak for an actress who built her image on perfection. Yet Norma refused to let vanity or fear diminish her. Instead, she turned to beautifully crafted wigs and hairpieces that allowed her to reinvent herself from film to film, elegant, mysterious, and always immaculate. On screen, her wigs became part of her artistry. In The Divorcee and A Free Soul, they framed her face in styles that reflected liberation and bold femininity, mirroring the modern woman she portrayed so powerfully. Behind the scenes, hairstylists and designers adored her professionalism. She never treated her wigs as a weakness. She saw them as tools of transformation. Even after her retirement in the early 1940s, Norma's polished image remained untouchable. At public events, she appeared radiant, her hair, real or not, perfectly coiffed, her confidence unshaken. Norma Shearer made elegance a form of resilience. Her wigs were not a disguise but an extension of her will, proof that the real crown of a Hollywood queen was never her hair, but her composure, intelligence, and the quiet power of refusing to fade. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was more than just beautiful. She was breathtaking. The Austrian-born actress dazzled Hollywood in the 1940s with her sculpted cheekbones, porcelain skin, and that dark, glossy mane that seemed to shimmer under every light. To audiences, she looked untouchable, almost unreal, and in a way, she was, because much of that iconic hair was enhanced by wigs and hairpieces crafted to perfection. Hedy's natural hair was fine and fragile, often breaking under the strain of the endless curling, teasing, and hot lights of studio sets. Rather than mourn it, she took control. She worked closely with stylists to design sleek wigs that matched her exact texture and tone, blending seamlessly with what remained of her own hair. To her, it was less about hiding and more about artistry, another form of invention, like the groundbreaking technologies she quietly worked on away from the cameras. Off-screen, Lamarr was an inventor who co-created a radio frequency system that would later inspire Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The same mind that could perfect a beauty look could also imagine a world of wireless communication. She used wigs not as vanity but as armor, a way to command her image in a world that wanted to own it. By the time she appeared in films like Samson and Delilah, her look had become legendary, deep waves cascading like black silk. Few realized how much science and calculation went into maintaining that illusion. Hedy Lamarr's wigs weren't just for glamour. They were a symbol of control, of reinvention, and of a woman too brilliant to be confined to one identity. Beneath the shimmering curls was a mind that saw beyond beauty. Sometimes the most fascinating things about a woman are the ones she never advertises. Cary Grant. Cary Grant wasn't just a movie star, he was the embodiment of charm itself. Every gesture, every line, every smile felt like poetry in motion. He was the man every woman wanted, and every man wanted to be. But behind that famously sleek hair, the perfectly combed raven-dark waves, lay one of Hollywood's most carefully guarded secrets. Much of it wasn't real. By his early 40s, Grant had begun to lose his hair, a slow and distressing process for someone whose image depended on effortless perfection. Yet rather than panic, he handled it with characteristic grace. He turned to discreet, handmade wigs and toupees that blended seamlessly with his natural hair. They were lightweight, impeccably styled, and matched his debonair persona so well that even co-stars never noticed the difference. Cary treated his appearance like a performance. Every suit, every gesture, every strand of hair part of a larger illusion. He once said, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." It was his way of admitting that the man on screen was a creation, polished, composed, and deliberately built from fragments of style, wit, and restraint. His wigs were not about deceit, but consistency. The quiet discipline of a man who understood that Hollywood ran on perception. Directors admired his professionalism. He'd arrive camera-ready, never complaining, always maintaining that signature grace. Even in his later years, when the charm softened into wisdom, Grant's look remained impeccable. Beneath the gloss and glamour, he taught Hollywood that confidence, not hair, was the true secret to timelessness. The legend of Cary Grant wasn't just in how he looked, it was in how completely he made the illusion real. In the golden age of cinema, perfection was not found, it was created. Beneath the shimmering lights and flawless close-ups, even the brightest stars relied on quiet illusions. A wig here, a hairpiece there, a touch of art to keep the fantasy alive. But these weren't signs of vanity, they were symbols of devotion, proof of how far legends would go to preserve the dream. From Bogart's tough elegance to Hedy Lamarr's radiant genius, every strand told a story of control, creativity, and survival. In the end, Hollywood's wigs weren't about hiding flaws, they were about owning them and turning them into timeless magic. Which of these transformations surprised you most? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more untold Hollywood truths.